Kristian, you have, as I said in the beginning, you worked in both the Norwegian sort of startup ecosystem and now as internationally as a remote resource, but now also in the epicenter of tech in the US in San Francisco and Silicon Valley.
So what we started doing was splitting the engineers into tiny teams, basically starting tiny startups inside of the company. And one of these apps, I think it was just called Wordware Twitter bot, and it would literally read all your tweets and give you a whole personality roast. And people just found it hilarious. And because it said in large letters, powered by Wordware, it led to more than 300,000 signups.
How do you think this will affect sort of the software industry if people like me, I don't come from a technical background, can start making tools myself and don't need to pay someone to come help me with that?
I would say it's the death of mediocre Saas. And there are multiple kinds of risks, of course, but one that I've seen in particular that the US is not afraid of, whereas the Norwegians and maybe Europeans are afraid of, is the risk of growing too fast. Yeah. Users are coming in, your server costs are through the roof. Nobody cares.
What are some of the main differences between what you experience in the US now and then Norway in particular, but Scandinavia? Like,
I don't want to be labeled as like a workaholic or somebody who says always work harder. People in the US, especially the early stage companies, generally just put more hours in.
With us today, we have Kristian Bø, who works for the US-based company Wordware, which is very, very exciting because they just recently raised $30 million in one of Y-Combinator's largest seed rounds to date. Welcome, Kristian.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And thank you for being here. Could you just start out by giving a quick introduction to yourself? Who is Kristian? Where do you come from? Where do you live now?
Sure. I'll try and keep it brief, but I'll also go a little bit in depth because I think it'll be a nice backdrop to some of the answers I'll give later. So yeah, Kristian Bø, raised here in Oslo, Norway. After high school, I thought I would go on a big journey with education around the world, basically studying abroad, doing an exchange abroad, and then doing a master's in a final third country. But in the end, as many Norwegians, I ended up in national service in the army for a year. And during that time, I got accepted into NTNU, like the MIT of Norway. And I decided that was also a pretty good university. However, the dream of kind of living abroad was not lost. And so instead of waiting all the way until the fourth year, already during the third year, I did an exchange down to Australia. And when I was there, my curiosity about living abroad and working abroad really got supercharged through this book called The 4-Hour Workweek. And I just wasn't able to put down that idea ever since. When I was finished at uni, I ended up as an IT consultant, as most of my peers. Luckily, I was able to get an assignment down in Berlin. So I went down to work there for Klarna, like the first kind of unicorn experience, if you will, before being moved back to Norway and Schibsted and VG, a big newspaper here in Norway. Then I started looking a little bit towards the US, but before I could really make a move on that, I joined a startup here in Norway called husleie.no as a product lead. So kind of diverging a little bit from the developer path already then. However, even though it's a great company and they've done really well since, it wasn't the right fit for me. And after 6 months, I left and booked a one-way ticket to Thailand to be a freelancer from there, which I executed on pretty well. However, the timing could not have been worse because 2 months later, the global pandemic hits. And again, I was kind of back at square one in Norway. Luckily, I was able to channel that frustration into building a startup here in Norway with my friend Kyle McClanahan. And after a year and a half of that, we were able to get acquired by Mesh Community here in Norway. And since then, I've been living and working as a digital nomad, doing mostly remote consulting for companies in the US.
Very nice. And we were just talking about before we started recording how we know each other. When I worked in venture capital, you were a student and you helped us do our website back then. That was how we met. And then I've been following you. And I remember also talking to you when you did the startup here in Norway. And I thought you would be a very interesting guest because you've seen both the sort of the Norwegian ecosystem, how it works, how it is to work in a startup here, how it is to work with investors here, but also you have a very international profile. And now, what can you say, more US-based profile, given that you joined a US-based company and was part of the founding team there. How did you end up meeting the Wordware team?
It all happened very fast. We were connected by a mutual friend this summer. I was very happy in Oslo this summer after a longer time abroad. So at first I actually said no, but then 24 hours later I was like, okay, let me sit down with these guys.
So this was before Y-Combinator?
This was it, while the company was in the middle of Y-Combinator.
Okay.
Yeah. And they were going completely viral. And so, yeah, my friend was like, hey, they really need good people right now. And so I remember sitting down at 11 p.m. on a Thursday here in Norway. And 20 minutes later, I had a flight ticket to San Francisco. And I decided just to drop everything and go over there and see if there was, like a good fit over there.
Could you just tell me, how does that happen? So you have a friend who knows them personally, I assume?
Yeah.
And they're like, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
They're good guys. You should really look into this.
Yeah.
How? So you look at what the investor deck, or what do you look at to make that call?
I looked at the product. I made an account and I started playing around. And even though I was a little bit skeptical, I was kind of just blown away. Even though this is, as we'll get into later, almost more like a no-code tool. As a developer, I felt incredibly empowered in order to make stuff that would have taken me hours and hours to code in just a couple of minutes. And then seeing the performance was no worse. Yeah, I was intrigued.
Yeah. And then, so did you do an interview with them from Norway, or did they trust your mutual friend enough to just say, let's go?
At Wordware, we have a slightly different take on hiring. If the initial kind of culture fit interview is good, what happens a lot of time is that people just start and they do what's called a trial period. But it's not quite like the trial period here in Norway where everything is already hammered out in advance. It's more like show up, work as hard as you can, and we'll see if it's a good fit. And if it is, then we'll do the contract stuff later. They, of course, pay during this trial.
How long is the trial typically? It's
typically between 2 weeks and 2 months. There is no, like, they try to be standardized, of course, but at the speed we're moving and with the complexity of some of the tasks, it's really hard to have a standard. And it's more important for everyone that it's like a quote-unquote perfect fit rather than trying to adhere to a standardized period.
Okay. I'm just curious about, so very practical question, but you go to San Francisco, they're like, you come in there in Y-Combinator, you test this. Do you live with them? Do you find an apartment? How does this work?
Yeah, they offered me to stay at their couch for the first week, for sure.
It's very sort of startup vibes.
Definitely. But I was, since I've been traveling so much these last years, I've come across this company called Outsite.co, and they have, they basically operate these shared living spaces across the world. And so it was easy to just get a room with them for my stay in San Francisco.
You were used to it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's very good. Okay, so maybe now just an intro to Wordware. I think this company is super exciting, and obviously someone else did since they raised so much money. Could you just give like the introduction to what is Wordware and what can you say mission are you on?
Right. So the big kind of grandiose vision is that we are looking to bring structure to human AI collaboration. My favorite way to describe it, though, is that we empower developers to build AI agents. Our true strength is really enabling anyone, regardless of technical background, to do the same. You can see it already in the word, actually, Wordware, because this is how we think about it. Initially, there was hardware, and then there was software, and now it's Wordware, software that's built with natural language, thinking of English as a programming language instead of Python or JavaScript.
It's again, obviously, I've been reading quite a bit about Wordware as prep for this, and it's for a company like Ambi where I work now. It's super exciting. We have a few technical people, not that many, but we have a lot of domain knowledge. So to enable us to start building tools ourselves is super exciting. And I guess that goes for many companies. Could you just give me an example of companies that have used this and what they have used it for?
For sure. Let's walk through a couple. One of our exciting customers is called AI SDR. It's basically a company that are building out a tool where you, as a sales rep or like a VC fellow or really anyone that's curious about a company, you just put in the company name or the URL, and they've created, multiple AI agents in Wordware that work in conjunction to go out and research this company and compile a report for you, but not like a specific report as they think is best for you, but rather you can make it very customizable to your needs and kind of tell it what to focus on. Another very concrete example, which I think is very funny, is what I call an AI stock picker. Super simple 3-step process. You tell agent 1 to read today's top financial headlines. You tell Agent 2 to do what's called a structured generation and reason about what stock to buy based on these headlines. And Agent 3 executes a piece of code to execute the trade in your name. And using something called paper trading, you can actually set up quite a few bots at the same time with different research strategies, and then you can monitor their performance over time. And this little bot, I made it in 7 minutes in Wordware.
It's very cool. So, and what do you think, like, with this, is this what you call prompt engineering?
Oh wow, that's a loaded term in San Francisco these days, because it can mean so much. I would say prompt engineering is more for when you are working directly with ChatGPT and you're trying to fine tune a certain prompt in order for it to give the best results. But you could say Wordware is in the same line, but in a bigger context, because one of Wordware's key powers is that it lets you iterate very fast on a program and trying out many different versions of the same flow. And so I guess at the end of the day, yeah, you could call it prompt engineering.
I personally find this super exciting. I think I said this a few times now. Do you think that this will also, some talk about the death of Saas? Do you think, there's a big question, and I'm not asking you to have all the answers here, but how do you think this will affect sort of the software industry if people like me, who's not, I don't come from a technical background, can start making tools myself and don't need to pay someone to come help me with that?
I would say it's the death of mediocre SaaS. Yeah. I think there will always be room for excellent vertical products. A bunch of smart people working on a problem can definitely go deeper into a solution than most people can. But if your software only really solves a very surface level thing, I think many people like yourself will find it easier to just build AI agents, either in Wordware or in other tools, to just solve those tasks closer to home, so to speak. And with these agents, it also allows for much greater customizability than what you would get using a mediocre vertical SaaS tool.
Yeah, oh, it's exciting. And the whole sort of space of AI agents in itself is something that's going to probably change a lot throughout this year. Y-Combinator, tell me a little bit about that. Super exciting, of course. Have seen many exciting companies go through that. How was that experience? You came into it like halfway through. How is what did you do during this program? And just tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, wow, where to begin? I've also had like a long history, or at least a long history of fascination with Y-Combinator. When I had my own startup here in Norway, me and the team actually got to the YC interview twice, but we bombed each time because we just couldn't present how we were going to make money or like why our idea was special in few enough words. But suddenly here I was in a company that was already in the middle of the program, and it was very, very exciting.
How many companies in the same batch? Do you remember?
More and more. As they've grown more successful, they've some people are actually giving them a little bit of critique for this in the Valley these days, that they are putting less of a filter in front of the program in favor of just making more shots, as you say in the VC industry. Though I would say the bar is still pretty high. And when you meet a YC founder, they usually have a bit of an X factor, which is quite interesting. For the team itself, we were working like a lot. I'd love to get more into that later when we compare the US and Norwegian ecosystems. But when people get into YC, it's to work hard.
And how long is the
program? Is 3 months.
3 months.
Yeah, 3 months twice a year. So two batches.
3 intense months.
3 intense months. People approach it differently. But what I'll say about YC is that it's actually, obviously, though it's quite special, it's not unique. Just like any accelerator program, what you get out of it is proportional to what you put in. And there's certainly nobody is going to help you build your startup for you. So in that way, it's most like any other accelerator program. One difference, though, is that I think they are positioned to help you ask better questions. And though the answers are not necessarily better than what you get around the rest of the world, the answers are tailored to a different scale of company, because a lot of the YC alumni have literally built these unicorns and decacorns and companies that have changed the world. And so, of course, they might have some different perspectives on what it takes to do such a thing.
So, and how big was the team? How many people were you in the team when you were in Y-Combinator?
When YC started, I believe Wordware was around 5 or 6 people, and then we ended at around 10 people. We experienced a lot of extreme viral growth, and we completed our fundraising well before demo day.
Yeah, because just talk me through the program. You start out, some come in just with an idea, some come in maybe already with a product, or how does that work? How does the program end? That ends with the demo day. Could you just talk me through that?
Yeah, exactly right. YC takes in a whole breadth of different companies, from literally the idea stage, if the team is strong enough, to companies that are already making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month or more. The terms, I don't know them exactly, but they are quite generous. I believe it's about $500,000 or 5 million NOK at a 7%, like taking 7% out of the company. So that's already miles ahead of what we have here in the Scandinavian ecosystem. Then the program itself, you are left to yourself. It's still you that has to build the company. You
come in and sit somewhere, or is it? Do you just sit somewhere in San Francisco? Or?
They do have an area in SF called Dogpatch where they have an office, but no, people are kind of spread out. And how they bring people back in is through office hours, keynote speeches from other alumni, and some pretty good parties, which can be a lot of fun.
Mostly guys.
Mostly guys, though more girls than you'd expect. This whole myth that San Francisco is nothing but guys, I think it's vanishing. Almost a bit like technical programs at universities in Norway and around the world.
Yeah, that's probably good.
Yeah, probably good for the better.
Okay, and then you end up with this demo day.
Yes, exactly. You go through the program, you build. You have very high kind of goals, but not just like a 3-month goal, are we going to have 100 customers? It's more like, okay, this week we want to get our first customer. Next week we want to get 2 more customers. And then you're kind of targeting this exponential growth, because at the end of the program, there is a demo day where they have all the, like, a huge list of investors, all the alumni, everybody's tuning into this virtual presentation. And then,
because it's virtual.
It used to be in person, but now the batch sizes are too big, and so they've chosen to do it virtual for everyone, even though there's no more lockdown. Yeah, and it's quite hardcore. You're only allowed 1 slide, I think, for your company. Just a very, very simple slide, and you have 1 minute to pitch your company and your progress since the beginning of YC, with the goal of then getting more VC meetings afterwards.
But for Wordware, the fundraising was already in place, or
yes, already underway. Luck definitely played a part, but also a little bit of grit. You see, we had a product already entering into YC, and towards the middle, we were pretty confident in what it could do, but we didn't have any reach yet. So what we started doing was splitting the engineers into tiny teams, and each kind of pursuing a different, not a product direction, but almost like a micro Saas. Basically starting tiny startups inside of the company with a unique front ends and unique domains, but all with Wordware as the back end, doing like the advanced AI service. And one of these apps, I think it was just called Wordware Twitter bot, just went completely viral. It worked by being able to input your Twitter handle into a site and click roast, and it would literally read all your tweets and give you a whole personality roast based on that, and people just found it hilarious. So within a couple of weeks, we got more than, I want to say, like almost like a million uses of that bot, and because it said in large letters, powered by Wordware, it led to more than 300,000 signups to Wordware. So that's the kind of meteoric growth I haven't heard of anywhere outside of the US.
Yeah, okay. So, but you did still present at the demo day, or was there like no reason to do so? Or?
And we did, because it's like a fun thing to do, but it was almost an afterthought. I think there's a video on Twitter with us, the team, basically crashing into the CEO's presentation and trying to like distract him while he's doing the demo day presentation. Yeah, we'd already signed the term sheets for the actual race.
It's interesting to hear about Y-Combinator, hear about the US. And Kristian, you have, as I said in the beginning, you worked in both the Norwegian sort of startup ecosystem and now as internationally as a remote resource, but now also in, what could you say, the epicenter of tech in the US in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. What do you think, like, what are some of the main differences between what you experience in the US now and then Norway in particular, but Scandinavia? What are like for good and bad?
So I don't want to be labeled as like a workaholic or somebody who says always work harder, because I think Norway has fantastic talent, and I know people work extremely hard here as well. But you can't get around the fact that people in the US, especially the early stage companies, generally just put more hours in and also have, or maybe that's just Wordware has a bit of an unhinged culture when it comes to that. I said it to another Norwegian founder friend the other day, and basically our Friday meetings are from 6 to 8 in the evening. And he was like, I would never fly in Norway, and I have to kind of agree. Yeah. But we make it worth it, I guess. Like when we have those kind of meetings, there is pizza, there are beers or whatever you wanna drink. Everybody kind of goes around, says what they've been working on this week, and show it off to the rest of the team, as well as the CEO and the CTO kind of laying us up for what's going to happen next week. We don't do it anymore, but during YC, we and many other companies as well pursued a doctrine called the Beijing 996, which kind of came out of Beijing, where the whole team commits to showing up at the office at 9 a.m. and not leaving until 9 p.m. for 6 days a week. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing that for too long, but I think some Norwegian startups also could benefit from just embracing like the task like that with like a given start date and an end date, and find it very motivating to see how much actually gets done in such a time.
I assume not many in the team have small kids that needs to be picked up. Then
This is true. Yeah. However, I think as long as you don't all have small kids, you can still do a version of it, because like sure you can be dogmatic about it and say like you have to literally be there from 9 to 9, but being a startup is all about being flexible, and it's more about the ethos and going at it with everything you got more than anything else.
It makes a lot of sense, and I guess it's nice with work-life balance, but if you're competing against young guys and women who don't have those obligations, who can work 9 to 9, 6 days a week, then they're just gonna do more in less time. What are some of the key differences you observed between Norway and the US? You talked about the work-life balance or just the working hours. Is there anything else? I mean, raising, just not to sort of, what can you say, direct the question too much, but raising $30 million in a seed round is an enormous amount, at least compared to what you would see here in Scandinavia.
Even in the Valley, it's practically unheard of. I'll try and answer both. One more point on the whole working a lot thing. One thing that makes it easier to do that in the US is that the companies are also set up in a better way to just support the employees through the process. At Wordware, for lunch, there's just like a shared Uber Eats link that goes around. Everybody puts in exactly what they want. Of course, we try to be frugal, but nobody is going to question how much you want. It's all about just get the food you need to be the most productive. And then at dinner, it's the same thing again.
So you do your grocery shopping there? You're just like, I need all this for... No, I'm just kidding.
you literally could do that. Nobody would blame you. No. Yeah, you're very well set up. There's no talk about like, how should I say, what do you call it in Norwegian? Like taxing it back to the government. It's just very easy to work hard. Yep. As for the VC process itself, of course, this massive influx of users and attention online played a huge part in it. But one thing I'm happy to report back is that process management, like VC process management, which I know many startups in Norway care about, played a huge deal for us. The two founders, of course, did extremely well with being charismatic and talking about the ideas and presenting the recent growth to the investors. But we had a third guy, kind of like an ex-VC. He actually reminds me a bit of you.
I'm curious what you're going to say now.
Yeah, but he just managed the process so well. He made sure that all the VC emails that came in were attended to. He made sure the data room was up and running. He was able to guide the founders into how to, I don't want to say playing the VCs off each other, but definitely creating a little bit of FOMO.
Yep.
And that's eventually what led to that just insane race.
And just diving a bit deeper on that big, raise and amount of money. That happened during the Y-Combinator.
Yeah.
Had you raised money before? Was this the first time that the company raised?
Well,
I guess you raised from Y-Combinator with the.
True. So the company was, I think they did a smaller raise back in the UK and maybe Poland. That's where the founders are from. But practically before YC, there was like a complete reset of the company. And it's fair to say that YC was the first real investment. And then this was the immediate follow-on round.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, like, when you sign the term sheets and like, okay, guys and girls, we had $30 million US.
Yeah.
Did that change anything, or is it just okay? Let's meet again tomorrow. Remember, we had 9. Don't leave before 9. Yeah,
we did have a big party, so we didn't meet up at 9.
No,
but it was. But no, many more things than we thought stayed the same. Yeah. And we are looking to stay the same and keep this hunger all the way until Series A and beyond, I believe.
What do you think the money will be spent on? Is that mostly getting in new talent, or what's
Yeah, for sure hires. As an AI company, we do have server costs, but due to our pricing model, we are actually in a much better position than many of our competitors for that, because we do like a 2-tier system where you can choose to pay a little bit upfront to us, starting from 0, going to 40 and 300 and more. But if you're at 0, then we just take whatever the AI models charge us. Let's say ChatGPT. Let's say if you use them directly, maybe your bill would be $1 for the month. If you use them through Wordware and you pay us 0, that bill would be $2.50. But then as you deploy it and you see your usage go up, then it makes sense to pay us $40 a month. And then your ChatGPT bill multiplier would go down from 2.5 to only 1.5.
Okay.
And then the more you pay us, the smaller the multiplier gets.
Yeah, okay. So talent and server costs.
Talent and servers. That's what Silicon Valley runs on.
Yeah. And
well, we're going to have a nice office as well.
That's nice.
That's actually like an interesting thing to dive in a bit deeper on, this in-office culture.
Yeah, because you've been a very remote resource for quite a period of time.
For sure. Ever since I was in Australia, I kind of jumped to this. Yeah, working remotely, and I've been espousing remote work for talking to most of my friends here in Oslo. I'm sure they're very bored of me talking about it. But now, going to San Francisco, I'm extremely excited to be in the office. And I do believe that for many companies, especially early stage, I'm going to have to eat my words here, because I remember when I had my own company in Norway, I was adamant that it was going to be remote from day one. Now, I believe you can succeed with remote, but it's easier if you, like it's easier with a bit of idea on product maturity. So I think it's fine to have a goal of being remote, and I think you can scale while remotely. But in those first months up to a year, depending on the idea of the team, there are large benefits that comes with being in person, and I think they cannot be ignored.
Yeah, because in Wordware, there's an in-office culture, so the talent you hire will also come to San Francisco.
For sure. If you cannot get a working visa to the US, you cannot join the company. Even in the US, like if you want to live in New York or Chicago, then you're just not gonna get the job. Yeah. Everybody needs to be in the office.
Okay. I was we touched a bit upon these differences between, again, Scandinavia and the US. Are there any other differences you see? Are there any areas where you think we're actually doing quite well in Scandinavia from what you have seen? Or
no, I've been, ever since I was at NTNU, I was part of the student organization called Start NTNU Entrepreneurship Club. I feel like I've seen Startup Norway go in a very, very positive direction, with the Startup Lab and Mesh kind of coming up as big hubs here in Oslo. several big companies as well coming out of it.
Can I ask a very sort of targeted question here? Do you think there are many fantastic people here in Norway, so I don't want to generalize. Are we ambitious enough?
Yeah.
It might also be difficult to compare with a select batch of Y-Combinator companies, but like, are we bold and ambitious enough to achieve those like really amazing results?
It's an excellent question, and one I've had to kind of face myself in a little bit, because I think I'm an ambitious person with big goals. However, after the conversations I've had in San Francisco, I've had to reevaluate that a little bit, because like my kind of idea around building a startup is that you start small, succeed, grow bigger, go in a different direction, and you kind of grow the pie as you go along. And but nobody has time for that in the US. You just see the world and you go all in immediately, and you raise capital to do that. And the thinking is that the harder the problem, the more people are willing to pay to have it solved, and the more I don't know if it's the right word, but more interesting, talented people are motivated to work on it, the harder it is.
Is there also, what can you say, advances to coming first, let's describe it that way, in what you're doing? So it's also like, let's get more money into this, more talent into this, and just win sort of that what can you say, position in the market? Yeah,
being fast as a huge advantage, and also locality. Being in San Francisco is a massive advantage, I would say, because more than anything else, it's a city about paying it forward. So anyone you meet, whether they are like a billionaire or a CEO of a scale-up or somebody working in a newly started startup, everyone is all about pushing each other forward. Everybody has friends, everybody has a network, and it's all about making connections. And it doesn't matter if you're in the office, in a bar, in an investor event. It's all about paying it forward and boosting each other up.
And how is San Francisco? I mean, it sounds like I'm asking about an old friend. How is James? No.
Yeah.
But you hear a lot about it. It's been this hub, tech hub, and then there's at least been some years where you didn't want to walk the streets of San Francisco. How is it? How do you experience it now?
So I've been traveling in and out of the US for a bit for the last couple of years. In the beginning, mostly in New York, which also took a hit during the pandemic. But I've seen that city really kind of rise again. And when I was there for a bit of time in the spring, I really think the city had found its stride again and was an amazing place to be. When I touched down in San Francisco in August, I was initially quite shocked. It was my first couple of weeks. I was just doing some meetings at the Wordware office and going back and forth and the same commutes. And the streets were literally some Walking Dead level of, some kind of situation like that. However, once you were there a little bit longer and you discover there is an immense beauty to the city, and there are many areas that are nothing like what you've seen or heard in the news. And most importantly, once you start getting a little bit below the surface, you realize the city has an intense upwards trajectory. Yeah, just like whereas both New York and San Francisco fell down a bit during the pandemic, New York already rose to the occasion earlier this year, and San Francisco is very, very close to catching up and maybe even superseding it because of this massive influx of capital and talent and energy to the city.
It's good to hear. I want to get your advice also on so I do these early stage investments now as an angel investor. Now you have seen like I don't know if there are many different investors in the Bay Area, but some of the best investors also reside there, and you got some amazing investors on your cap table. Is there any piece of advice you would give to an investor here in Scandinavia, to someone like me?
I think being an active investor means a lot, especially in for like an early stage company.
And active, are there because most investors will say I'm very active, right? But are there any areas where you see that, or from your experience, where you see that being more sort of beneficial?
That's a good question. In a lot of cases, whether it's with sales or hiring, just putting your network for the founder's disposition is hugely valuable. But you know better who is suited to kind of meet or for founders or help. So it's being active and constantly going through your own network and setting up like real meetings instead of just being like, oh yeah, if you see we're connected on LinkedIn, just let me know and I'll put up an intro. I think that's a small change you can make in your strategy that would pay massive dividends for everyone involved.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything you want to... I actually haven't asked that before, but it's interesting when people are just a little bit, direct and just say, you know what, I understand that people want to have that work-life balance, but you are competing. Just know that you're competing with these guys and girls who are working 966, or what did you call it? 996?
996, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and risk is like definitely something we can learn to have an even greater appetite for here in Scandinavia. And there are multiple kinds of risks, of course, but one that I've seen in particular that the US is not afraid of, whereas the Norwegians and maybe Europeans are afraid of, is the risk of growing too fast. In the US, if you see that you have an opportunity, people or like users are coming in, your server costs are through the roof. Nobody cares. You have this intense belief that you can raise money later, and even if you talk to software vendors, they are also able to cut you some slack a lot of the time. Like Vercel is this huge infrastructure giant now in the world, really. Lots of Norwegian companies are hosted on them as well, and sometimes they get in like some bad positions on Twitter where there's these founders that are like, oh yeah, we got a lot of users and suddenly our Vercel bill was massive. But I have to give them some credit as well, because if you talk to them and you're like explaining the situation, they will easily defer your payment until after you've raised capital, or at the very least work with you to help you manage your spending and billing so you don't end up in those situations. I can speak to this very, very clearly because I've had that same fear myself of like, oh no, we can't grow too fast because that'll make the bills explode. But that is something they're just not troubled with in the US whatsoever.
I can easily see that, and I think I've seen it in many situations in Scandinavia. And I think, at least in Norway, I might have said it in one of the other podcasts, but I think we have a little bit more, in many cases, more of a PE mindset than we have a VC mindset. So you have to see more proof before you really want to, just scale on something that already works. Whereas a lot of the venture capital actually is, okay, some of the metrics are there, let's just push behind it, even though we don't have, the clear path ahead just yet. Yeah, for sure. And then there was one last thing I wanted to mention about YC as well, like another parallel to accelerator programs here in Norway too. While YC is cool and prestigious and there are lots of important people to talk to, really the most important reward you get from being in YC is the friends you make along the way, like the other companies, your batch mates. And I think that's a lesson to be taught here in Norway as well in these accelerator programs, that while, investors are great, advisors are great, nobody can give you always better advice or at least consolation and encouragement than the people going through the same process as you are at the same time. That makes sense. They're in the same situation.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a good one to end on. Like, if you were to give one advice or one learning and one advice from your career up until today, maybe sort of especially shaped by what you've experienced in the last 6 months, what would that be?
So one thing that has paid dividends for me was even though the timing wasn't great, it was like a global pandemic. If you have an idea that you want to start a startup, might as well just do it now because there's never going to be like the right time. And even whether it turns into a massive financial success or not, the learnings you get from just trying to build something from nothing, going from 0 to 1, as they say, is huge and hugely applicable in any job you'll do later. And I can easily connect the dots in my career over the last years, and seeing that everything goes back to taking the plunge and starting that startup. And as for learnings, maybe, don't be afraid of that risk. And don't be afraid to grow fast and see where it takes you.
That's very cool. I like that. American attitude. Thank you, Kristian. Thank you so much for joining us. And very curious to see what the next year brings for Wordware. It will be exciting to follow. I've signed up, so I'm going to test it. Already have tested it. So thank you
sure.
so much for joining us.
And if you're ever in San Francisco or anyone else, hit me up and we'll grab a coffee or dinner.
I sure will. Thanks.
Sometimes you get the gold.
But it's really interesting to hear, and I love that you're honest about it, because it's like the most boring, in my opinion, is when people are like, well, it depends, and I kind of understand. But it's interesting when people are just a little bit, direct and just say, you know what,